aspirations to stabilize institutions larger than themselves. Many grappled with identity crises, questioning whether their achievements were earned or inherited, and whether success truly belonged to them. This internal conflict rarely surfaced publicly, because vulnerability contradicted authority. Yet within private circles, these questions shaped leadership styles, producing executives who either doubled down on control or consciously decentralized power to escape the weight of legacy. In families that survived multiple generations, adaptation proved essential, as rigid adherence to tradition often led to decline. The lesson passed quietly from parent to child was clear: respect the past, but never worship it. Silent apprenticeship thus evolved into a dialogue between history and innovation, where children learn to honor foundations while reinforcing structures against collapse. As we reach the present, the silent apprentice stands no longer in the shadows but at the helm, carrying within them years of observation, correction, and expectation. Their authority appears effortless because effort has been internalized since childhood. Yet the shadows remain, not as burdens but as guides, reminding them that power is temporary, markets are unforgiving, and legacy is earned daily. What defines these leaders is not brilliance alone, but continuity, the ability to sustain influence beyond personal ambition. Silent apprentices do not seek applause, they seek endurance. And as new generations begin their own quiet education, sticking labels, running errands, listening from corners, the cycle continues, unseen but unstoppable, shaping the future of global power one silent lesson at a time. In recent decades, the technology sector introduced a new variation of silent apprenticeship, where founders like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs did not inherit empires but created environments where their children were deliberately shielded from entitlement, learning discipline through normalcy rather than immersion. Gates famously limited inheritance to avoid creating passive heirs, reflecting a modern reinterpretation of apprenticeship that values independence over exposure. Yet even here, proximity to innovation shaped perception, teaching children how ideas scale into systems and how influence operates behind interfaces. The digital age accelerated learning cycles, allowing young successors to observe data flows, market reactions, and global impact in real time, compressing what once took decades into years. But speed introduced fragility, as rapid change destabilized traditions that had anchored dynasties for generations. Silent apprentices now had to unlearn as much as they learned, adapting legacy frameworks to volatile environments. The rise of ESG, sustainability, and social accountability forced heirs to redefine success beyond profit, integrating values into strategy not as branding but as survival mechanisms. Those who failed to adapt faced backlash that eroded trust and market position, proving that silence without evolution became irrelevance. Yet the core advantage of silent apprenticeship persisted: the ability to read situations intuitively, to sense risk before it manifested, and to understand that power rarely announces itself loudly. Children raised in the shadows recognized patterns others missed, because they had watched cycles repeat across generations. They understood that empires rise not from single decisions but from consistent discipline applied over time. This perspective fostered patience in a world addicted to immediacy, enabling long-term investments that outlasted trends. But patience also demanded sacrifice, as heirs postponed personal. In America, the rise of antitrust laws and public skepticism toward monopolies meant that inherited power required justification, not assumption. Families like the Rockefellers and Mellons invested heavily in philanthropy, not purely out of generosity but as strategic legitimacy, teaching the next generation that giving was not weakness but insulation. Children raised within these frameworks learned that social responsibility was no longer optional, it was operational. The Walton heirs absorbed this lesson as Walmart became a symbol of both efficiency and controversy, understanding that scale magnified criticism as much as profit. Their upbringing inside stores and distribution centers helped them respond pragmatically, but public scrutiny forced a new kind of apprenticeship, one that included public relations, ethics, and political navigation. Meanwhile, in Asia, silent apprentices within conglomerates learned to balance tradition with globalization, rotating through international offices to understand cultural nuance and geopolitical risk. These experiences forged leaders who could negotiate across borders instinctively, because they had been exposed to complexity early, long before stakes became existential. Yet despite preparation, the psychological weight of legacy often intensified with responsibility, as heirs realized that mistakes would not be forgotten as personal failures but recorded as family ones. This pressure cultivated caution, sometimes bordering on paralysis, because bold moves risked destabilizing carefully preserved empires. Some heirs rebelled against this gravity, stepping away entirely, selling stakes, or redefining success outside the family framework, proving that silent apprenticeship did not guarantee obedience. Others embraced the burden fully, internalizing the belief that personal fulfillment was secondary to continuity. Discovering that inherited authority did not guarantee respect and that leadership demanded emotional control as much as financial intelligence. The Ludlow massacre revealed a painful truth to him, that systems built efficiently could still fail morally, and that the shadow education he received did not shield him from public outrage. This moment reshaped him, not as a businessman alone but as a steward of reputation, teaching him that in modern empires perception could be as powerful as profit. Similar awakenings echoed through other families, as heirs confronted realities their fathers had controlled from a distance. In the Ford dynasty, Edsel Ford found himself navigating the tension between innovation and tradition, torn between his own progressive instincts and Henry Ford's rigid control, realizing that silent apprenticeship prepared him to manage factories but not to challenge authority without consequence. His struggle illustrated a central conflict within dynastic power, where preparation does not guarantee autonomy and inheritance can feel like a beautifully gilded cage. Across Europe, banking families like the Rothschilds refined succession into an art form, introducing heirs gradually into decision-making while maintaining collective control, ensuring that no single individual could destabilize the system. This model prioritized continuity over individuality, producing leaders who thought in decades rather than quarters, but often suppressed personal ambition for institutional survival. As global markets expanded, silent apprentices faced challenges their predecessors never imagined, from regulatory scrutiny to media exposure that stripped privacy from power. The 20th century transformed wealth from something admired quietly into something interrogated aggressively, forcing heirs to adapt not only to markets but to narratives. Silent apprentices do not dream of business, they breathe it. They understand that empires are fragile, that markets are emotional, and that control is temporary unless constantly reinforced. These lessons, learned young, create leaders who appear calm under pressure because pressure has always been present. But this calm often masks isolation, because few peers can relate to a childhood spent observing negotiations instead of playing games. In private, many heirs confess that they never chose business, business chose them. Yet choice becomes irrelevant when identity and enterprise intertwine. This is the hidden architecture of wealth, unseen but foundational, shaping not just companies but cultures. The world celebrates founders, disruptors, and visionaries, but rarely acknowledges the silent apprentices who ensure that empires survive beyond a single lifetime. As we move deeper into this story, we will uncover how these children transition from observers to decision-makers, how silence transforms into authority, and how the shadows they learned in eventually become the structures they control. What you have heard so far is only the beginning, because the real transformation happens when silence ends and responsibility begins, and that is where part 2 will take us. The silent apprentice reaches a moment that defines everything that follows, the moment when observation turns into action and learning becomes accountability, because there is a profound difference between watching power operate and being the one who must wield it. For many heirs of great dynasties, this transition does not arrive with applause or ceremony, but with quiet expectation, a first decision made under watchful eyes, a test disguised as trust. John D. Rockefeller Jr. experienced this when he was thrust into the center of labor disputes that threatened to fracture Standard Oil's legacy. These children did not learn business theory first, they learned business reality, how margins were thin, how scale magnified mistakes, and how discipline separated survival from collapse. In Asia, family conglomerates known as chaebols and keiretsu institutionalized silent apprenticeship, rotating heirs through subsidiaries, factories, and overseas branches, ensuring they understood the machine before controlling it. In each case, childhood became incubation, adolescence became testing, and adulthood became execution. Critics often argue that such systems create entitled elites, but history suggests the opposite. Entitlement arises when inheritance lacks immersion, when power is handed down without preparation. Silent apprentices are not spoiled, they are shaped, sometimes sharpened to the point of emotional dullness. The paradox is that these children often grow up craving anonymity while commanding visibility, having learned that attention invites scrutiny and scrutiny invites vulnerability. Their education is invisible but relentless, forming leaders who rarely credit their upbringing publicly, because admitting preparation undermines the myth of genius. Society prefers stories of sudden brilliance, not decades of conditioning. But behind every overnight success in a dynasty lies years of quiet observation, correction, and exposure. As globalization intensified, this model adapted, with children attending elite schools by day and absorbing boardroom realities by night, blending formal education with inherited intuition. Technology magnified this effect, allowing heirs to observe global operations in real time, accelerating learning curves that once took decades. Yet the core principle remained unchanged: proximity creates mastery. Those who grow up near power understand it differently than those who chase it from afar. Only absorbed slowly. This silent apprenticeship shaped generations, embedding business instincts deeper than formal education ever could. What outsiders saw as privilege was, internally, pressure, because these children carried the unspoken burden of continuation, knowing failure would not only disappoint a father but fracture a legacy. In many households, dinner tables doubled as boardrooms, where deals were dissected, rivals criticized, and strategy discussed openly, not to include the children but to expose them, allowing knowledge to seep in organically. Questions were rarely encouraged, because curiosity was expected to mature into comprehension without handholding. Mistakes were permitted, but only once, because repetition signaled weakness. This method was brutal, efficient, and devastatingly effective. By the time these children reached adulthood, business decisions felt less like choices and more like reflexes. They did not need motivation, they had been conditioned. Yet beneath this efficiency lay emotional costs rarely discussed, because silent apprentices learned early that vulnerability had no place in enterprise. Feelings were liabilities, and hesitation was an opening for competitors. Many grew into leaders admired publicly and fractured privately, struggling to separate self-worth from performance. But dynasties endure not because they produce happiness, but because they produce continuity. The 20th century expanded this phenomenon globally, as industrial families in Europe, Asia, and later Silicon Valley adopted similar philosophies, embedding children within startups, labs, and strategy meetings long before titles were assigned. The Walton family, founders of Walmart, raised their children inside stores, stacking shelves, observing customers, and learning logistics firsthand, because Sam Walton believed humility and ground-level understanding were the antidotes to corporate arrogance. Andrew Carnegie, though he began in poverty, imposed the same philosophy on those around him, believing that exposure to work early created resilience, and that resilience created dominance. Children were placed in offices, factories, and warehouses not to earn wages but to earn awareness, to understand how systems moved, how labor was managed, how profit was extracted, and how silence often spoke louder than instruction. In the Vanderbilt family, where railroads stitched together a growing nation, sons were taken on inspection tours not as guests but as observers, expected to notice inefficiencies, overhear negotiations, and understand that control of infrastructure meant control of destiny. Cornelius Vanderbilt did not lecture his children about power, he showed it to them, forcing them to watch how a single decision could crush a competitor or elevate an ally, and these lessons, learned in youth, hardened into instinct by adulthood. Across the Atlantic, the Rothschild family perfected this model with surgical precision, turning family into a financial institution where children were educated in languages, correspondence, accounting, and discretion from an age when most could barely write their names, because secrecy and coordination were the true currencies of banking empires. A Rothschild child learned early that nothing spoken outside the family walls was ever truly forgotten, and that loyalty to the enterprise came before personal desire. These children were silent not because they had nothing to say, but because they were taught that listening was power. In factories owned by the Fords, Henry Ford's son Edsel moved quietly through production floors, learning not just how cars were built but how workers thought, how morale influenced output, and how innovation could either liberate or enslave labor depending on intent. Edsel did not inherit Ford Motor Company by accident. He inherited it because his father believed that leadership could not be taught suddenly. Silent Apprentices begins not in a marble boardroom or beneath a chandelier, but in a cold, dusty warehouse where a child barely tall enough to reach the table is pressing paper labels onto wooden crates, one by one, under the dim glow of a hanging bulb, unaware that this repetitive task is not punishment but preparation, because long before wealth is inherited, power is taught. And the greatest empires in history were not built by men alone but shaped quietly by children who learned business. Not from textbooks but from shadows. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear will change the way you see family, legacy, and the true cost of wealth. And if stories like these fascinate you, take a second to subscribe and like, because this channel exists to uncover the truths others polish away. In the late 19th century, when industrial America was roaring to life, children of business families were not shielded from labor, they were immersed in it, often deliberately, because men like John D. Rockefeller believed comfort weakened character and ignorance destroyed dynasties. Rockefeller did not raise his children among servants and silk alone. He raised them among ledgers, discipline, and consequence, paying them pennies for chores, fining them for lateness, and making them account for every cent, because he understood that money without understanding creates heirs, not leaders. While other children played, young John D. Rockefeller Jr. listened to conversations behind closed doors, absorbing discussions about oil prices, railroad negotiations, and hostile competitors, learning early that business was war disguised as paperwork. This pattern repeated across America's rising elite, in families whose names would become synonymous with power, where childhood was not a phase of innocence but an apprenticeship disguised as family life.